Welcome to the Hope After Narcissistic Abuse podcast. I am your host, Amy Helms. Each week, you will hear from experts across the country and even world speak to you on recovering from narcissistic abuse and even how to manage these relationships. You will also hear some periodic solo episodes on how to manage these relationships and what recovery is like. It is my hope that you will leave each episode with some renewed hope that you can and will beat this. Thank you for tuning in. Hi, welcome to another episode of Hope After Narcissistic Abuse. Today, I'm excited to welcome Dr. Selvam. He teaches in nearly 25 countries on all continents. He's a licensed clinical psychologist from California, a senior trainer in Peter Levine's somatic experiencing professional trauma trainings, and the developer of integral somatic psychology, or ISP, a science-backed and body-based approach designed to reduce treatment times and improve diverse outcomes in all therapy modalities through building a greater capacity to tolerate emotions, especially the unpleasant ones, through the body. The approach can also be of great value in managing one's emotions and health in daily life. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Amy, for the opportunity to be with you. Yeah.
Great. Can you share what ISP is?
ISP is integral somatic psychology. It's an approach I've developed to work with emotions through the body to improve outcomes in all therapy modalities. That's what ISP is. The core of ISP is the practice of embodying emotions, on which I've written a book that you have.
Yes. What led you to write the book? I think it's very interesting.
I started to develop and test the approach of the practice of embodying emotions in different countries. Over the last 25 years, I've taught in as many countries on every continent. Yeah. I started teaching somatic experiencing, or SE, Dr. Peter Levine's work. Yeah, it's a trauma healing modality, an excellent modality that you're trained in. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And in the process of teaching it and in observing my own process, I started to feel the need for a way to improve the work with emotions. All the different therapies, I've been through personally, modalities I've been trained in, have left something lacking, and which led me to think about how to improve the work with emotions. Yeah? And I think that general inquiry has led me to this place. Yeah, I'm particularly interested in not just resolving symptoms, resolving difficulties, but use the opportunity to help the client develop a greater capacity for the underlying emotions, that difficult emotions that led to the problem. Let me give an example. People can develop all kinds of respiratory symptoms and cardiovascular symptoms from the inability to tolerate some emotions, such as fear or grief in the chest area. Yeah. Right. Symptoms including asthma. In working with the person, what I do is to develop a capacity for the underlying feeling, fear or emotion in the body, yeah, so that the person is not only resolved in relation to that situation in which the fear arises or sadness arises over time, but in the future, when they run into the same emotions in different situations, they have a certain resilience to cope with life. So, and why am I doing that? And that, it's one of those things that developed in the following way. I started to, I was reading, searching, reading, and etc. different approaches to working with emotions, the science on emotions, etc. Then I quickly learned that an emotional experience is not limited to the brain, and it's not limited to the body. An emotion, an impact on a situation on us is applicable to every cell in our body, especially if it's a significant impact. Yeah. And what we do, we don't like unpleasant emotions. The brain doesn't like unpleasant emotions because unpleasant emotions, by their very nature, are states of stress and dysregulation. This is what Sigmund Freud identified as the pleasure principle, that the brain avoids displeasure and looks for pleasure. So we develop different defenses like denial and projection and so on the psychological level. But on the body level, we can also develop defenses such as constriction, etc. So what we end up doing is we try to get rid of the unpleasant emotion by shutting the physiology down. For example, a simple defense would be just holding one's breath by constricting the breathing muscles. And this can become habitual, which can then affect our well-being. So I was thinking, if an emotion is potentially an experience of the whole body and the brain, and we're trying to restrict it to one place or two places in the body, it doesn't resolve. And we develop symptoms in the process. So if we can expand this emotion by undoing the defenses in the body to more places in the body, then it would actually be tolerable for people to be with the emotion for a longer period of time. This is the idea. This was the idea. And I didn't know the science behind it as much as the basic idea that an emotion could be throughout the body, and we develop defenses against emotions not only in the mind but also in the body. And we can do different things, undo the defenses in the body and make the experience of the emotion more in different places in the body. And that could help us. And that could help us to tolerate it. Because to give you a simple example, if I'm lifting a heavy load with one arm, it's going to be very strainful to the one arm, right? It's 50 kilo bag. If I lift it with two arms, then it's actually easier to lift the same load with less strain on both right and the left arm. That's the idea. This is how I explain it to my clients. And they go, what? Emotions are like that? I say, emotions are exactly like that. Let's try it. Let's try it. Let's see. You have a fear in the chest, in this heart area. Put your hand there. See whether you can expand it to other places. Sometimes just the intention expands the energy and the emotion with it. And notice whether you're able to tolerate it more. And they say, yeah, I'm able to tolerate it more. Exactly. That's what we're going to do to more places in your body. Not to every place in the body, as much as possible in the short time that we have. And then give the brain enough time. It gives the brain enough time to what? Process the emotion. One of the criticisms against emotion is that emotion is irrational. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It leads to irrational behavior, conspiracy theories, and action, right? Hateful actions. So, but if you can tolerate the emotion and give the brain more time to think about the emotion and the situation, then it can arrive at better outcomes. And that, Antonio Damasio had already found that people with emotion, paradoxically, think better and behave better than people without emotions.
The asthma example, my son was premature, and he tried to come when he was 22 weeks, but was on bed rest. And so he came with torticollis, which is, constricted, but had breathing problems, has asthma. But I've taught him to hold his hands on his chest and recognize he's breathing. And so he's learned to not be afraid anymore. But the same thing you're talking about, where he's learned he's safe, that it started in the womb.
Yeah. Because the pre and perinatal trauma can, leave the person sometimes with terror, existential terror, right? A sense of endangerment all the time that can lead to constriction in the body. So just expanding the terror can actually make it more tolerable and give the brain, time to think about it. Is it really dangerous out there now, or is it just feels here that way? Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So I started to get outcomes. People people started to resolve emotions, think better, behave better. Cognitive, emotional, behavioral outcomes got better, but people got better quickly. They say, "Wow, I've done this for a while, and I've tried different things, and here I am." It's such a shift. And so I said, well, I need to, now that I have enough evidence I've gathered from different people, not only in teaching it, but also from people who are applying the method, let me write a book about it. It is at that time that I started to look for the science behind it. And I found so much exciting evidence, which can be summed up in the following way. Shall I do that now?
Yeah. Well, so what's embodiment to you? Because we've heard a lot about it from on other episodes, and I think everyone has a different meaning for it.
Yeah, of course.
Can you explain your meaning?
Yeah. Embodiment can be defined in different ways, right? For me, embody oneself is to embody one's energy more fully, right? And one can only embody one's energy more fully because we're connected to the environment. This is an energy system. The environment is an energy system, right? And this is not woo-woo. I'm talking in terms of, physical energies. And that we are constantly taking in the energy from the environment, not only just oxygen, other energies, right? And then exchanging energies with the environment. And to be embodied for me, is to be energetically embodied, to be open to the environment, right? And the reason why that's important is because when my body is open, right? Because we know in the last 25 years, my body is important not just for behavior, doing things, saying things, mm-hmm. but also for emotional experiences. But also for cognition, all aspects of cognition, including attention, memory, etc. Now we know in the last 25 years, through the science of embodied cognition, depends on the body and its availability. So if I shut my body down because I have fear here, then I make the body less available, for cognition, emotion, and behavior. So when I tolerate emotions, especially opposites emotions, my body is more open. It's more embodied with energy. That's what I think of as embodiment. Yeah. So if I narrow the definition, what is it? If you were to ask me, what does it embody an emotion, Raja? I would say the ability to experience consciously the emotion in the body and be able to tolerate it. The ability to consciously experience and tolerate emotion in the body to the extent possible, in as much of the body and brain as possible. That's what I would call emotional embodiment.
So even like the emotions we don't like, or the adverse emotions,
especially emotions that we don't like, and we are designed not to like it's not that we don't like it. The brain is designed to avoid unpleasant emotions. So you and I are in the same boat. There's no way around it, and we will be that on the same boat till we die, because brain is programmed. It's a matter of survival that we avoid states of stress and dysregulation in the body and keep moving the organism towards states of stress and states of free of stress and regulation, which are what are pleasant emotional states. So
how do we get to that place of being able to be with those unpleasant emotions?
How do we do that? And before that, I would add one more thing is that I've often heard people say, I have such difficulty with emotions. My clients have no access to emotions or affect. Yeah. The way I define emotions, I define it very broadly. I define emotions to include emotions, feelings, affects, moods, temperaments. Yeah, all of those things. And I define emotions to include even basic states like not feeling good, not feeling bad, good, feeling bad. So when I define the emotion uh, very broadly, then I can always find emotion. I don't have, I have, so it's easy for me to find emotion to work with, especially in the client who comes to me and says, I'm feeling bad in this situation. Please help me. Right. So I say, okay, let's start working with just feeling bad. Where do you sense that in the body?
Mm-hmm.
Let's develop a capacity for that. When we do that, what happens interestingly? What happens interestingly is that the person develops a capacity to feel bad, which is the capacity we need to feel any unpleasant emotion. The other unpleasant emotions that are more differentiated, such as sadness or emptiness, loneliness, despair, they become more, it becomes more possible to actually bring them up from the unconscious and embody them and process them and
Mm-hmm.
complete them and so on. So that's what we do, and so find the way I structure the method in the book. It's in terms of 4 steps, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have an emotion, then start with step 1. Take a situation that's difficult for you in your life, and then in second step, you support the person to have an emotion in that situation. And if you don't find another emotion, just go with feeling bad. That's good enough. In fact,
Well, why don't we use the example in your book where you were helping the tsunami
right,
people? Can we do
right,
that?
yeah, yeah. Um, Actually, the the um, the there was a
I think that was a
boy.
great example of
Yeah, there was a
the
boy
child.
who
Yeah,
the boy who had after the tsunami. He was
yeah.
in the tsunami. After the tsunami, he started to have heart palpitations, anxiety reactions,
Mm-hmm.
and and he came to us when we were working in the village and said that he has these heart palpitations that are very scary. And since the tsunami, uh, every time he hears that another tsunami might come or he goes to the ocean. So we said, okay, let's notice where the fear is, right?
Right.
When you think of the tsunami, like, where is the fear? He said, it's here. And then we said, okay, let's see whether we can expand that in the chest, right? So breathe into it and see whether you can put your hand on it to expand it to more places in the body. And we actually ended up having him move his arms, touching his arms. I forget exactly how we did it, but we managed to get the energy as well as the emotion expand in the chest as well as into the arms. And we just asked him to do that every time he got scared. And the result is that when we checked with him, 2 months later and a year later, he said that he no longer has that problem because he's able to manage it that way. So that's a simple example of how just expanding the emotion from one place to more places in the same area to another area of the body can actually make the emotion more tolerable from the argument, from the point of view of the impact. If you the impact is, if you have you get a blow, if you can get more of your body to withstand it, it doesn't damage the blow, that area the blow lands in, something like that. But it also makes more scientific sense in that it gives the body more brain more time to process the situation and the emotion and arrive
Especially if
at.
it's the heart, because whenever our hearts are beating, that's going to elicit a lot of fear because it's,
Yeah, absolutely,
something's wrong
absolutely.
with my heart, I'm in danger.
Yeah. I mean, that unconsciously the brain will generate fear right away. Any symptom,
Mhm.
anything that goes wrong in the body creates alarm and fear in the brain. And of course, if you happen to be hypochondriacal, then of course it creates more fear. But
Yeah.
it's functional that there's fear. We need to pay attention to something that's going on because it could be a matter of survival, life or death. So the practice of embodying emotions is how to look for an emotion, find an emotion by defining emotion broadly, so that we're not just looking for a narrow set of emotions that we learn in trainings, basic emotions, combination of basic emotions, but to be able to always find emotions, especially in people who come to us and say that they're feeling bad in a situation, that they want our help, and then expand that experience to more places in the body. How much expansion, that all depends on the person. Yeah. And so that they have a more capacity to tolerate the emotion for a longer period of time, so that the brain can process it better, so that thinking improves and behavior improves. And as I said, the body becomes more open. Then it gets connected to the environmental energy, archetypal energy, or whatever it is that you call it. In the minimum, the person breathes better. That should help the person, function better by breathing in more oxygen than when they're kind of constricting the breath, not to feel that emotion of sadness in the chest or the fear in the chest. Yeah. So
when you talk about, improving outcomes in therapy and being able to work with the emotions, what's the science behind that? We were about to talk about the science and I kind of interrupted you.
Yeah. So the science, in a way, in a nutshell, is that we know from the science of embodied cognition, emotion, behavior, that all three, emotion, cognition, behavior, depend not just on the brain, as we used to think. They depend on the body and its openness and the environment and the connection between the body and the environment. And we shut the body down, disconnect the brain from the body and the body from the environment, most of the time because of unpleasant emotions. Even when we shut the body down not to do something, right, or not to think something, it is because of an unpleasant emotional consequence that prevents us from, being afraid of that action or that thought. So it comes down to emotion. So when we and how do we shut the body down? We do many ways in which we can do it, like constriction, like inhibition of the nervous system. I've written there's a whole chapter in the book that talks about 7 different dynamics through which we know that the brain and body physiology can be inhibited from experiencing an emotional experience, repressing an emotional experience. So we know how to work with them in a simple way. That's what my approach is about. You don't need to know exactly how the body is shut down. Then the body becomes more open. And I said, the more I can expand the emotion, the more tolerable it becomes, whether it's a pleasant emotion or an unpleasant emotion. And I'll give you examples of both. Yeah. Examples of both. Then the body's open and available to all 3 functions. And that's why they improve. And when these things improve, and of course, the treatment times get less. So I kind of, this morning I was talking to somebody in Poland, where I'm going to be doing a training starting this fall. I've never been to Poland, and I'm going to start a training there in the fall. And she asked, how do you use this, in the different therapies? And one thing about it is that it's not a modality that's competing with other modalities. It's something that you can add to other modalities to improve outcomes in those modalities. And I said, in general, this can be used by people in daily life, right? If we have an emotion, we can think of just expanding the emotion by expanding the awareness, right? And reading the book, there are different ways in which you can actually learn how to expand the emotion in the body to improve your capacity to tolerate it, and through that, improve cognition, emotion, behavior, and improve your life, not only to get rid of the symptom. But in different modalities, I say, when you don't have an emotion, you're working with, let's say, psychoanalysis, ISC, hard to get to an emotion, switch to ISP, like take the side road, leave the highway of SC, somatic experiencing. Or when your approach is stuck with a client, whether you're doing psychoanalysis or cognitive behavioral therapy or somatic experiencing, somehow it's stuck. Do a session or two of ISP, take the side road, and then get back to whatever it is that you do, psychoanalysis or Jungian psychology. You will see everything will be more fluid, because when you take a difficult life situation in the client's life and develop a capacity, the organism will open up, right? Cognition, emotion, behavior get more fluid. So it'll get more fluid in somatic experiencing or Jungian psychology or psychoanalysis or cognitive behavioral therapy. And then I say, if you're working with emotion in a particular modality and you tried everything in that modality, then take the ISP side road. You can work with it that way. So, or over time, you might just find it more convenient and more efficient to just use ISP. The practice of embodying emotions, that is, whenever you run into an emotion. So, but in daily life, it can be used. The book is actually written for educated self-help seekers too. So in a certain steps, right? And especially the last section, method section, is written with that, that it could, so that in mind, so that it can also be given to clients who can then read the logic themselves and be on the same page when you work with them. So
right. So you mentioned an example of a pleasant and a unpleasant emotion. What would those be?
Okay, let me give an example. So, for example, this is I got this, from someone who's just reading the book, a therapist, and she's taken an SC training with me, and she said, "I've been reading your book, and I've been thinking about taking your training, and then I had this client who has had a lot of trauma, yeah, and." We're not really moving. There's a lot of suffering. And I thought, why not give this method a try? I'm reading the book, let's take it for a ride. And she said, let's give it a try. She said, what's difficult right now in the situation that you're in? And the client said, frustration. I just can't stand the frustration of the situation. Okay. And she said, notice how bad it feels, as I say in the book, and let's see whether we can expand the frustration to cover more of your body. She said, that's all they did. Yeah. And the client got calmer. That is to be expected, because when you open up the body, then the breathing improves, it's automatic, right? And then she went home. That was one part. But then when she came back, she said, the client said, you have no idea how that changed me. I've been feeling so much more alive. I've had so much more motivation. I'm not as frustrated, and I'm not as much in anguish when other feelings come. So it's very interesting, And she said, I've been in the field for a while, and I've seen many different neat modalities and techniques, but this is something that struck me as exceptional. So therefore, I'm writing to you to let you know, to give you not only the testimonial, but also to let you know that I'm interested in taking your training. So it could be that. I can give you more dramatic examples.
It is.
But
It's
I thought
something as simple as like I fell several months ago and landed only on my left kneecap.
Yeah.
And
Wow. Ouch.
it was, but the orthopedist told me, one, I was too old to be doing those kind of jumps, but then also, well, you should have fallen on something else. But it's kind of the same thing. If I had
I
fallen on my whole
know.
body, it wouldn't have hurt, but I landed on that one part. So,
Yeah.
expanding out something, it's not going to hurt as much, or we can tolerate it. So I think
Right.
same principle.
Same principle. Same. There's another podcaster who said she's into body work and weightlifting and so on. And then she said, we teach people that when you're lifting something, a weight, use every muscle in your body. It's the same principle. Spreading the impact. It's spreading the impact. And it's like having more people to share your grief. It's like having more parts of your body to share your grief. I can go on and on. But here's an example of a pleasant emotion. And a student, told me that she has cardiovascular symptoms that doctors cannot explain. And so anytime somebody tells me about a medical symptom, I say, what is a medical evaluation? Because I don't want to be treating imminent heart attack, or of a coronary artery that's blocked. So have you got it checked? If people have migraines, have you had it checked? They could be having a tumor, for all I know. So usually people, when they have serious medical symptoms, they go to a doctor. They don't go to a psychotherapist or psychologist. And no, everything's fine. So then I said, tell me what you do. And because I knew that she was a spiritual person, and I wondered if she did any meditation. So out of the blue, I asked her, do you do any spiritual practice? And she said, yeah, as a matter of fact, I do. Do you do any spiritual practice involving the area of the heart? She said, yes. What is it? She said, I do a meditation where I'm staying with the heart and trying to feel love in my heart. And I said, okay. And what does it involve? I said, imagining a loving condition to bring about love and really concentrating it on my heart. And I remained focused on it. For how long do you do that? I tried, not enough, but I tried to do it for 1.5 to 2 hours. I said, that will do it. That'll do it. Because what you're trying to do is you're generating a lot of emotion, energy and emotion. And then you're forcing it to just be confined to one area. Guess what? That's like, putting all your weight on your left knee as you fall, right?
Yeah.
So I said, next time do this. First of all, don't meditate for that long.
And don't do it on your hands or a handstand.
And what you do is that you expand that love to more places in the body. And that's what she did. And she says that, she doesn't have those cardiovascular symptoms. It's quite simple, and so, but most of the time we don't want to face unpleasant emotions, not pleasant emotions. Of course, pleasant emotions like sexuality, etc., and love, etc., we also are afraid of. Then we have to work with the fear. But most of the time, it's the unpleasant emotions that give us a problem. Therefore, we end up working with people with the unpleasant emotions, and no matter how old we get, emotion, its access, and the ability to access it and be with it, tolerate it, depends, number one, on the support we have from other people outside. Because we are all we're just waves in an ocean. We depend on other waves in the ocean. It's just structurally that way. We can explain it in terms of quantum mechanics and electromagnetics and so on. But that's what it is. So we have to support them, be there to support them, and then to educate them and support them to expand it to more places in the body. And if we can do that, we can have miraculous changes, in treatment times. And I've written a whole chapter on such cases where only a little bit of emotion, a little bit of expansion for a short period of time was sufficient to shift a huge symptom like asthma. In one instance, where a person was had asthma after breaking up with the quote unquote the love of her life, and we worked with the sadness. We could hardly get to it because she had grown up without any very little support for emotions, but we were able to feel bad about the breakup and some sadness, etc. But what happened that night, it just opened up the floodgate and she cried, and then she didn't have another asthma attack after that. She told me 6 months later. That convinced me that we are forming these big symptoms that we go to doctors with. They estimate by the Psychophysiological Association of, in the US, estimates up to 1/4 or 1/3 of the symptoms that we go to medical doctors with are psychophysiological in nature, that is, emotional at the core. And so that gives us plenty of hope and scope to improve people by working with emotions through the body, by offering something simple that people can start to practice on their own. And that's what, because we don't have enough therapists, to reach everyone who is suffering,
Right.
with
People that are dealing
addictions
with
and
like
other things.
pain and things like that
Yeah,
can be dealt with.
yeah.
Mm.
And we have ourselves to blame, because we really diminished emotions as something irrational, something we shouldn't pay attention to. The science did it. Psychology did it. Now we're rediscovering the role of emotions. In fact, I attended a conference of the International Society for Research on Emotion, and attended a day-long conference on affectivism. Essentially, we are in the stage we're realizing the science is telling us that it's emotion that determines everything that we do in every moment, right? How we think, what we do, it's emotion that's the cause, not the other way around. Even though thinking and behavior can change emotion, but in every moment, where we are emotionally is what determines. And this is remarkable. So when I said, yeah, if we can find a way to regulate it through the body, then we also can make sure that the behavior and the cognition, thinking that the emotion leads to, is more rational, more productive, more relational, more social.
So for people that have been in abusive situations, that have been told, don't feel, you're being irrational, what's the way to get them to even start the process?
Yeah, if people are in an abusive situation, first we can help them to feel what impact it has on them. Sometimes we get them to feel how battered they are, how scared they are, how stressed they are. If we can do that, then they will make better decisions, whether to stay in that relationship or not, or what to do in that relationship to minimize the abuse that they're experiencing, if possible.
Mm-hmm. And then, for those that are out of it and have
Of
trouble,
course,
feeling because they've been told not to feel for so long, or their feelings have been minimized.
Right.
Same process.
Yeah, same process. But I just want to say, as caution, if people are in active abusive situations, then we need to get them out there, especially children.
Yeah.
Having said that, then we have some time to process it. Yeah, same thing. To say, this is where we reflect. We need to support them with care and sympathy and empathy. Say, hey, that is really. It's hard for me to hear that. How can you? I cannot imagine what you've gone through. So to get them to the emotion by providing them the enough support, and not just educating them and saying emotions are good, etc., but actually supporting them to have the emotions. The reason why they don't have the emotions, they push it away, is because they haven't had the support. Yeah, and then they might have thoughts against emotions that we can work with, by giving them reasons. So
that's great. So your book, this could be something that people could do for self-help.
Absolutely. If you buy the book, and I even tell psychotherapists the following: read the first section to get an overview, and go to the third section to get the 4 steps, and then try it on yourself or your clients, and then read the middle section, the theory, the substantial theory that tells you why the results you're getting.
Great advice. And I'll link your book in the notes so people can access it. But, I'm a nerd, so I think the science section is fun. But so I think people would enjoy it. But I think it's a great tool for anyone to use that's going through this and trying to really access that emotional part.
Yeah. there are very interesting studies there. No? For example, when we have emotion, we tend to cover it up by not showing it in the face or the tone of voice, right? That's the first thing that we do, right? And it becomes habitual. You know what that does? From research shows that when you prevent the emotion from coming into your face or into your voice, throat, they see, they done research where they've wired people up in their brains while they show them movie clips that are very emotional. And then notice in one group, they tell them, bite on a pen so that the whole face, throat area becomes fixated. It's not involved. Another group, no such condition. They notice the difference. What is happening in the brain? They notice that during the experiment, the people who are biting on the pen, not involving the facial muscles and throat in it, their emotional areas and association areas that process the emotions and in relation to situation is not lighting up. And then when you ask them to recall what they saw after the experiment and 2 weeks later, guess what? They cannot recall the emotion, they cannot recall the details of the situation in which the emotion arose, etc. So by just not allowing the emotion to come into the face and the throat, we are severely inhibiting the ability of the brain to process the emotion and the situation.
Why people clench their jaw and have TMJ.
Yeah, exactly. Then there are other experiments that show that the same thing applies to the rest of the body. That if the body is shut down to an emotion, then the brain cannot process it well.
Mm-hmm. Right? So like women that are victims of sexual violence or clench their pelvic floor.
Exactly. Pelvic floor, the stomach muscles, the chest muscles, the arm muscles, the leg muscles.
Yeah.
The organs, clenching in the organs, mm-hmm. and in the earlier the trauma, the clenching or the constriction inhibition in the central nervous system, spinal cord, brain, etc. So how do you work with them? So it might seem complicated, but I have a simple way of doing it. And that is, emotion is potentially throughout the body, right? Especially an intense emotion that's incomplete. Yeah. So if it is there in one part of the body, it is not defended. If it's not there, it's defended. How it's defended against, you don't need to know. You can just put your hand there and get your attention there, energy there, while you look at the emotion in another place, and it will connect to that place too. And so in a way, I've tried to make body psychotherapy simple. And I think I've succeeded from the experiences I have, not only with people I work with, but also from the experience of my students in so many countries who tell me that it works. So
yeah, my son did a few sessions with Chris Lynn White. He's a trainer. He's not faculty, but he's an assistant, I guess, in California. But where he had my son like pushed on a bed trying to get it to move because my ex-husband hurt his arm by dangling him upside down. But he had him like complete the response that he didn't get to do. And then he had him like push on a wall and then do a couple other things to get him because he was doing some weird things with his arm. So I didn't know if that was the kind of thing you meant.
No, not necessarily. He's using movement to disinhibit the arms, right? The arms are inhibited from doing an action. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, so it frees the body. Right? Mm-hmm. Whereas you can use movement, mm-hmm. for example, to get the emotion of fear from the chest to the arm. You can have them imagine sensing the fear in the chest and bringing the awareness of the arm in to see whether the energy from the chest and the emotion from the chest would also follow into the arms. That's a simple way of doing it. But you can also do what? can also get them to move the arm, right? Move the joints of the arms to undo the defenses in the arms to see whether the energy from and the emotion from the chest would also flow into the arms. So there are different ways to do it. Or it could just be touching the arm to undo the differences in the arm. So there are different ways of doing it, not just through movement.
Well, thank you for being a guest. I think our listeners learned a lot from you. And where can people find you online?
Well, they can find me at www.integralsomaticspsychology.com. Once again, www.integralsomaticspsychology.com, or they can also look me up under Raja Selvam, RAJASELVAM. They can just Google me and then they can find me.
Wonderful. And all that will be in the show notes as well. Thank you again. Thank you again for tuning in to our podcast, Hope After Narcissistic Abuse. We hope you were able to leave with some renewed hope. And if you like what you heard, please subscribe to the channel, give us a review, head to the show notes for more information on the things that we highlighted. And there's also a link to the website for a course that we offer on the same topic, Hope After Narcissistic Abuse. Thank you again, and please tune in to the next episode.